So because I get so many direct messages and suggestions about doing content for fitness as it pertains to things like Special Forces selection, Ranger selection, and then also fitness for combats, because they sort of all sort of the same theory, fitness theory behind preparing for things like selection or actually doing combat or operations. So just want to talk a little bit about that. And combat fitness, we'll call it, right? Or really operator fitness, all the things we train for. It's sort of a very niche thing in the fitness realm of what you're training for, and I'll explain why. So at least for things like Special Forces, everything we do involves carrying huge amounts of weight on our body while we do it, right? So from Special Forces selection and assessment to the Q course to combat operations, for example. On a typical combat operation, even if it's just a one-day operation, I would have, well over 100 pounds on my persons, right? From my kit to my weapon to my ammo to water to food, grenades, everything, right? And there's plenty of times in the Special Forces qualification course that you're going to be carrying well over 100 pounds on your body at any given time. Now, that's not necessarily that unique, but what is unique is then carrying that amount of weight for huge distances and extended amount of time, right? So you might be carrying well over 100 pounds on your body for, over 8 to 10 hours at a time for, 10-kilometer movements, So now all of a sudden we're in the realm of where we have to be not only very strong, but we have to have incredible amounts of muscle endurance and cardiovascular fitness as well. So that becomes far more difficult to achieve, to have all three of those things, right? It's fairly easy to train towards being really good at one of the three of those. It's very hard to maintain a fitness level that has all three of those, but it is necessary for any type of selection or doing combat operations. So again, I'm no fitness guru, but I just wanted to talk about what worked for me to maintain that type of fitness throughout my career. So for example, I was never the most fit guy in the whole world, but for example, my last combat rotation, I could squat over 500 pounds, and I also could still run a 12-minute 2-mile and a 34-minute 5-mile. So for those of you who know those types of standards, being able to lift that much weight and still maintain that level of speed and endurance is pretty good, right? So how did I manage to do that? Well, here's where sort of the theory behind combat fitness comes in. So I learned this from a old Delta Force operator who's sort of famous over in the unit for a lot of reasons that I worked with, and he taught our team a bunch of stuff about this type of stuff. And the idea sort of goes like this, that we have to train at extreme levels of volume, right? Repetitions or distances or whatever we're doing. But we also still have to maintain a challenging amount of weight while we're doing it, right? It's not good enough to do a ton of repetitions if it's super lightweight. So, for example, what does something like that look like? So for me, and this is something I incorporated for really my entire career and even still do, even though I can't do the amount of weight I used to do, for lower body, both strength and endurance, because honestly, lower body strength and endurance is 90% of what you need for carrying that amount of weight and being able to move huge distances and everything like that. So what I would do twice a week is a 10 by 10, so 10 sets of 10 reps on squat of 225 pounds. So don't get too wrapped around the amount of weight, right? It's going to be different for everyone, but for me at that time, that was a fairly challenging amount of weight, but also still very doable for 100 reps, right? So, and then with that, we are taking as little amount of rest between sets as possible, ideally getting to basically almost none eventually, which starts to build an insane level of muscle endurance. So, one second, we got my dog. Sorry, dogs and kids. So anyway, so doing exercises like that, 10 by 10 on squat with that much challenging weight, low rest, will start to build an absolute insane amount of muscle endurance that can handle high levels of weight over huge levels of distance and time, which becomes very, very important for, selection or the Q course or a combat operation. With that, you need to then also still maintain and build your cardiovascular endurance. So, my two favorite things to do for that were, and I would try to do these twice a week as well, is a 4 by 800 meter sprints. Well, sprints, right? So 4 sets of 800 meters, so 2 laps around the track. And then you can switch that up and do 8 sets of 400 meters, so 8 sets of 1 laps around the track. At not necessarily a full sprint, but as fast as you can do them, right? So that will start to build your muscle endurance and your aerobic capacity. And then I would suggest to really build your long distance endurance is to add a long distance either run or ruck, ideally, because that way you can start building, ruck endurance and working on your feet and all those different things. Add one of those once a week as well. So if you just add something like that into your programs, right? So twice a week with that 10 by 10 on squats, 2 sprint days and a ruck day, I can guarantee you guys, you will have within a couple months, you will have an absolute insane level of lower body strength, endurance, and your cardiovascular ability will still be high. The theory of how we achieve high levels of strength, endurance, and cardio. I don't think, many operators would disagree with the theory that you need those things. I think, there's tons of different ways you guys could go about doing that, tons of different exercises and programs and whatnot. But that's just what I did throughout most of my career that allowed me to maintain really high levels of all those things. So I hope this gives you guys sort of an idea behind, rather than just looking for some program that somebody could give you to train for it, it gives you guys an idea of sort of the thought process behind what we're trying to cultivate, right? Which is being able to handle high levels of weight over long distances and over long periods of time, right? If we can do all 3 of those things, we are physically going to be ready to handle anything that the operator combat world will throw at us. So any other questions, throw them in the comments. All right, thanks guys.